Well, what a joy. Welcome to the final live stream of 2025. And we're delighted to bring to you our final, very important live stream where we're going to focus on the manager superpowers, or as we called it, building manager superpowers. So if this is the first time you're here with our live stream, my name is Wayne Clark and welcome to our final live stream of 2025. We're absolutely delighted that you could be with us. If you've been to some of these live streams before, then you'll kind of understand how the format works. We like to share best practice insights and some of the latest things that we're finding from working with thousands and thousands of different managers all around the world. And if this is the first time you've been here, then welcome. We're very much looking forward to sharing with you what we found this year and some of the latest tools, tips, and insights. And along with that, I am conscious that depending on where you are in the world, this may be your morning, your afternoon, or indeed your evening. So welcome, regardless of wherever you've come from. And please do give a shout out to your town, your city, your country. Let us know where you're from. We tend to have people dial in from all around the world on lots of different platforms. So again, a huge thank you for those of you who've joined us. Wherever you've joined here from, you are absolutely in the right place. So again, we're looking forward to sharing with you some of what we found through this year. And as you saw with the title for this session today, this is called the 5 Manager Superpowers for 2026. And actually, we're focusing on what we call career building superpowers. And this isn't because we've just thought about some great ideas of what we've seen out there. This is based on the insights of over 15,000 managers that we've interacted with, learned from, observed in action, and listened to in probably now more than 50 countries around the world, just in 2025 alone. So we're going to share with you 5 key things that we found. But as always, as you know, the format of these, this isn't about just 5 key insights. We're also going to focus on some super hyper practical things that you can do that will make a big impact for you, for your team, and for your organization as well. So we're going to roll some very quick intro. Let us know where you're from, and we look forward in 15 seconds to sharing with you our top 5 manager superpowers for 2026. So live from London, this is a very cold London. If you can't see much outside of the window, I'm here in central London. So welcome from a very cold central London. I think it's about 3 degrees today. I've just seen that we have someone dialed in from Oman. I'm sure it's not 3 degrees in Oman. Maybe for Warrington, Mr. Lee Rogers, it might be 3 degrees or probably colder. If you don't understand the UK, the further north you go, the further cold it gets. So we're delighted to be here in this lovely 3 degrees to share with you what we found out this year. We titled this session The Manager Superpowers, mainly because in a world where we're constantly bombarded with worrying, concerning messages about AI and how AI is going to take our world apart and how it's going to disintermediate every role out there and how it probably will be taking all of our jobs in the future, we don't know if that's going to be the case. It might actually be the case. But in the meantime, while we have jobs, we can certainly think about what puts ourselves in the best possible position to maximize the opportunities for ourselves, for our teams, for our organizations, and also ultimately for the people that our organizations are designed to serve. So we've taken a view based on the views of over 15,000 managers that we've listened to throughout 2025. And I'll be sharing 5 of those things with you. Again, not just the 5, but I wanted to get into some practical how-tos. If you know anything about us and what we do, we like to focus on practical how-tos that managers can put into practice and into action. And we're also going to have a few giveaways at the end of the session as well. So stick around for that. We've got something very special. We've got our world-class manager golden mug. It only gets given to very, very special managers. And my colleague Ashley is going to show us the golden mug in a moment as well. So we're going to talk about the golden mug. We also have some copies of our book, which is called How to Become a World-Class Manager. We're going to give away a couple of copies of the book. And if that wasn't enough, I know you're like, that's too much, Wayne. It's too much. If that wasn't enough, we're going to be giving away an access to our world-class manager programs. If you've not been through the program, it costs around $400 to go through the program. It's a 24 modular program based on all the best practice of management that we've picked up around the world. So we will be giving someone access to the program. I know it's unbelievable, but it will be happening during this live stream. So stick around for that as well. So let's get into this. As I said, in terms of our background and experience, if this is the first time that you've come across us, We've now worked with more than 250,000 managers in more than 50 countries around the world. I've had an opportunity personally to now work with more than 1,000 different CEOs, and our team is based all around. So we've got people in the UK, in South Africa, in Mongolia, San Benu, if you're here from Mongolia, in the US, and everywhere in between, in Turkey, in the Netherlands. And also we are doing a lot of extensive work across Egypt at the moment. So our work is global, it's everywhere. And we work with lots and lots of different organizations, primarily focused on growth, because ideally they want to grow and improve the service delivery for the people they serve. And our focus is how do we help the managers to be the best that they can be, and how do we develop what we call management capability. So this is a huge area of focus for us, and we've had the opportunity to interact with lots and lots of people. We have the book version in English. It's also in Arabic. So we're very honored to be republished in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia by Jarir Publishing, Jarir Bookstore. So our book launched in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia early in 2025. So we look forward to doing much more in the kingdom next year. And our insights come from all over the world, everywhere, all over. We actually started our research all the way down in here, if that's correct, in Wellington in New Zealand, and worked all the way through to Vancouver in Canada over here, interviewing CEOs, HR directors, frontline managers to try and figure out what great management looked like. You know, from your own experiences of working with managers, what great and also not so great management feels like. We took all of that insight and we built an approach called the World Class Manager Program, where we develop managers across the organization, which gives us unparalleled, it's a great word, gives us unparalleled insight, I think, into the state of management, how managers feel, and also the weight of pressure that tends to be on managers in organizations. So you may be listening to this from the view that actually this is something valuable for you individually, for your career, your development. And you may be listening to this thinking, how can these insights and our research help to strengthen the quality of teams, your organization? So you may be thinking about this from a position of we, or perhaps even you individually. And again, if you want to connect with us or with me personally, my name is Wayne Clark. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's my email address, and that's my LinkedIn handle. So anyway, enough with the intro. Let's go. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is what we found, and there are 5 of these things, 5 data points. Actually, maybe what we can do to save you the stress of writing all of this down, if you want to QR code me and connect me to on LinkedIn, drop myself a direct message on LinkedIn, and either myself or the team will pick that up, and we'll get a copy of the data and also of the slides emailed over to you. So just feel free to QR code myself, and we'll organize somehow to get the details of this electronically over to you. So when we talk about the first thing, it's what we call the adaptability advantage. Based on the insights of the 15,500 managers just this year alone, we found that 59% of managers say that their teams adapt well to change. So you may be looking at this from the perspective of the CEO, if you were the CEO of the company, and say, well, actually 59%, maybe that's not so bad. But perhaps not so good that 41% don't feel that they adapt very well to change. And the reason why we focus on this so much is because there is so much changing all the time. The weight of pressure on the manager's shoulders in organizations, on your shoulder, if you're a manager, is probably significant. And I suspect that the weight of demands and expectations on you and on your fellow managers doesn't get any less. It's not like we've met a CEO across the 50 countries that we work in who say, you know what, next year, guys, the goal for 2026 is just relax. Take it easy. You're working way too hard. This is never the case, not because people are horrible, but because the demands of pressure on the CEOs and on the leadership teams are also increasing. And the pressure on the investors by people who lend them money is also increasing. So, this is a never-ending cycle that we have to endure, and there is no probably way we can stop this. But we do know that the ratcheted amount of pressure is up, and it comes to looking at what's expected of managers. So when it comes to how do we adapt to change and cope with this volume of change, we think there are a couple of things that are quite useful to think about perhaps in this. And there are 2 things that we would ask you to think about in your teams. The first one is around how you might run small experiments. And what we recognize is that often we can fall into a rhythm of working as a team, often out of survival, that is quite hard to change and to challenge. And it might be useful to run some very small experiments, not to try and break big things, but to try and break some small things and try new things and see if things can work for you in a more effective way. Often it can feel impossible to change course and to do different things because we feel so constrained by the volume of work. But one thing that we would definitely recognize is perhaps there's a way to apportion a proportion of your week. It could be 5-10% of your week, and also of the team, and trial some new things that the team is not already up to and doing. The second thing is what we call proactive learning. So if you're interested in this whole idea, and I've become much more attuned to it actually, of trying to investigate and understand the whole idea of neuroplasticity, how we can be much more flexible and learn and adapt in a more effective way. Trying to, introduce and proactively learn as a team can be a really effective thing to do. And that could be taking, like, for example, a new AI platform or tool, and every month the team are going to try and get their heads around how to utilize this thing. As you probably feel when you're utilizing a technology for the first time and it's something that you're trying to understand, it can be frustrating, it can be difficult, it can be clunky, but within a few weeks, it feels quite natural. And I think the process of introducing regular ways for the team to learn and adapt can be a really healthy thing, because the amount of change never ceases. The amount of demands on the team will never cease. And of course, we need to try and be as a team as flexible and as adaptable as possible, given the volume of change that's always present in the organization. So one of the things that we would ask teams to do, and certainly managers, is to think about how can you have your team be much more adaptable to change. And that can be a big ask, but it's definitely doable. And the way that you can start is quite small. And the way to start quite small is to try and find some new ways of doing things that the team could try and adopt quite rapidly. The second thing that we found is around what we would call the alignment instinct here. So again, when we're thinking about what puts you in the best position for your career to develop these superpowers, the ability to align an organizational goal to something meaningful for the team is a really, really smart thing to do. And it's smart because we found out that about 50%, so half, of course, of managers believe that their goals and objectives are aligned to the organization's strategy and objectives as well. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I don't know. You can think about that for your own organization. I would think if I were the CEO of the company, then I would probably imagine that having as many people as possible aligned in terms of having a clear goal that links to what we're trying to achieve as an organization would be a really smart thing to do. So one thing that we can do as a manager is, how do we translate strategy into something meaningful for people? In a way, what we promote with managers is how can we become, in a way, like a translation engine? How do we play that key role of translating these sometimes complex messages into something that means something valuable and useful for the team? And then the second thing here is, how do we as managers and as future leaders really challenge the assumptions that sit inside of these strategic decisions? What I mean is, I had the opportunity now to work with, as I said, more than 1,000 different CEOs in 50 countries around the world. I've seen so many presentations where the CEO or the director general or the managing director or the secretary general shares a strategy with a group of senior people in the organization or a way forward. I've never seen where, and so let's play this out. So the CEO stands up and says, hello, everyone. Our new strategy for the next 3 years, for example, is to grow this business by market growth plus 3%, right? Because we've looked at all of the things in the market and so on. At no point during that presentation does somebody in the audience put their hand up and say, excuse me, sir, or madam, I believe that actually we could do market growth plus 5%. And everyone would look at them and say, are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? But nobody challenges these assumptions, and nobody challenges the status quo. Often, as I found, the goal becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I had an opportunity to observe a number of companies over a 5-year cycle. So I was looking at their budget targets every year for 5 years and going in and interacting with those leadership teams every year for 5 years. What I found was that they tended to get about, very, very close, within a couple of percentage points of degree of margin of error, if you like, in terms of what their budget was and what their achievement rate was. And I wondered, why was that? Was that because they were so clever that they could foresee all of the infinite number of variables in the future, or did their goals become a self-fulfilling prophecy? I would say in most cases they become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when it comes to challenging the goal, again, this can be a really smart way to stand out as a future leader inside the organization, is to understand the strategy well enough. I'm not saying that you might want to do this. This could be difficult, but here's my challenge, is to understand the strategy well enough that you could debate it with the CEO, that you could debate it with the CFO or the CHRO. And you may be the CEO or the CHRO listening to this, and you think about, how regularly do you debate this strategy with different people in the organization at different levels to stress test the validity of the assumptions in that strategic decision-making process? It's a lot of big business jargon words in there, but you understand my point, is that we often don't challenge this enough. So this is great for the company, it's great for the strategy, it's great for the people we deliver for, and ultimately for our individual careers, this is awesome because it means that we start to develop an ability to articulate and understand organizational strategy and the role of the manager and the leader and the operation in a way that we probably might not understand in any other way. So again, this is useful for everybody. It's a win-win-win. It's a triple win. The third area is what we call stakeholder magnetism. Sounds very cool. Stakeholder magnetism is about the connection that we've got with the people that we deliver for. Ultimately, we all serve somebody, could be internal, could be external. And we found that managers, again, 15,000 managers or more this year, believe that 55% of them meet the expectations of the stakeholders that they deliver for. And again, you may argue, that's about right. That's horrific. That's a horrible number. And we probably, like, again, if you were the CEO or the leadership team, I'd suspect you probably want that number to be much higher than 55%. And again, there's a whole bunch of questions now. What does that actually mean? So a few things to look at. One is, how many people do you know in terms of the key stakeholders that you, or how many people, don't you know that you really should know or would like to know or would want to know? So one of the actions that we think, again, is useful for next year is to identify 5 people that you think within that stakeholder mix, and this could be key internal stakeholders. You might be in a middle management position and you're aware that there are some senior key stakeholders in your organization that you would like to develop a richer and better relationship with. Who are those 5 people? It could be that you have a bunch of external key relationships and you know that there are a few key external relationships. Those could be suppliers, those could be customers or clients, those could be government or regulatory people that you know intuitively that you would like a better relationship with. Who are those people? Identify those 5 people and proactively go after building some of those key relationships. Again, to expand and enhance your network. And by the 6 degrees of separation rule, it means that if you're getting to 5 new people to build those relationships proactively, that will compound and exponentially grow your network digitally and also interpersonally as well. And then the second big thing here is to think about your influence. So how influential are you in your organization, and how influential are you with your stakeholder set? This could mean a moment of serious self-reflection. This could require a real introspective look at how you think you come across. And there are some people that you meet at work, in life, who are tremendously self-aware. I like to think I'm self-aware, but that might just be what an unself-aware person actually says. Who knows? But I like to believe that I'm quite self-aware, but I might not be. So it might be useful sometimes to ask some people what they think of me, what I could do better, what I could change. Sometimes the result and the answer is uncomfortable and it's not nice, but it's really important to try and understand your influence and therefore, of course, how you could be more influential. So there is something here about, in terms of delivering for key stakeholders and having that stakeholder magnetism in a world where everything's aggregated and intermediated by technology, the ability to build human relationships and have strong relationship connections starts to put you at a significant advantage, I believe, to many other people. And I'll give an example here. I lecture probably 5 or 6 times a year at different business schools and universities. Something happened recently which was quite interesting, that I get to the end of a lecture and I had about, 50 to 60 undergraduates there who were listening, asking a few interesting questions as the session went on, and then we finished. At the end of the session, they clap very politely, they leave, no one talks to me at all, and then about 20 minutes after they all leave the room, I get a bunch of LinkedIn requests to connect with me and talk to me. And I'm thinking, but I was there, like, to talk to live. If you wanted access to the opportunities in the world that I have, why wouldn't you do that? But actually, the interpersonal skill is something that becomes more and more of an advantage. So when it comes to developing key stakeholder relationships, part of this is about those actual relationships, I think, in terms of that superpower. And part of this is about honing and sharpening your ability to build those key interpersonal relationships as well. Number 4 is what we call becoming a capacity creator. Why? Because in the world we're in now, of course, our time, our attention, everything is taken up more than ever. We've got no time. Our attention spans are all sort of shot to death when it comes to the average of like 7 to 8 seconds, they believe now, for the average attention span of a human being. I mean, it's quite a difficult place to be. So we're not going to change that. And we're probably also not going to change the weight of the demands on our time. What we can do is think about how we might create more capacity and more space. 45% of the 15,000 managers that we spoke to across all of these countries said that they believe that they are overloaded. And there is this feeling of overwhelm, it's overload, it's stressed, it's all of those things that we commonly talk about in language that we feel, as well as our own personal stuff that we're going through and all of the other demands in our lives. So again, how might we, in this really busy world, which doesn't seem to become any less busy, how do we cope with some of this? One thing I would think about is what we call the upside. So what is the upside? There are many people, certainly in the world of technology and AI, who constantly talk to us about, and we get approached all the time as well, about there are significant time and cost savings to be had with this thing, this tool, this platform, if you implement it. Again, this is interesting, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to generate more revenue for you as a company, but it might generate some sort of cost saving or time saving. And then when we think about the time saving, it can be useful to think about a time saving, but it can be really useful to think about what you might do with that time. And I think when we're trying to create space in our busy lives, especially when it comes to our working lives in our teams, imagine that you could create like 10% more of your week, or 10% of your week could be empty space. What would you do with that time? And it's the question that I'll leave you with to think about. What would you do with that time if you could create 10% of your week? Imagine that you could create half a day per week of space. What would you do with the time that you could create? And here's a way that you can create some of that time as well. Super simple. I would argue that most of us probably couldn't take a vacation in the next week or two, apart from those, of course, that are going on a natural end of year Christmas break. But for those of us who are really busy, there's probably no way in your diary that you could take a break in the next couple of weeks. But I suspect probably from March or April, there'll be some space in your diary that you could take. One sort of super simple tip here is on the 1st of April, 2026, put in your diary half a day per week, and you keep that time sacred as if it were going to a doctor's appointment or to the gym or something that you would say as a non-negotiable, I will not take out this time. And then what you do with that half a day per week is the magic question. It's the upside to answer. If you could create 10% of your week of more space, what would you do with that time? And the reason why this is really important is because if you can start to find the motivator in here, the intrinsic and very often selfish incentive for what you can do with that time, then it's more than likely that you're going to create that space and utilize that space in the best way possible. Now, you might argue that half a day a week could be spent on personal development, on understanding clients better, on developing members of the team. It could be just spending half a day doing nothing other than thinking strategically about what's going on in the organization. There aren't many CEOs, let me tell you, based on my experience, who spend 10% of their week really thinking about what's actually going on in the organization, because they're often so busy and they're so, their time is, of course, a high demand. So again, having that time and space is key. And then the second thing here is what we would call like reducing cycle time. So things that you get used to doing over a period of time often take that period of time. And are there ways that you can take things that you already do and massively crunch that time and space down? So a great example, and I don't know if the team would appreciate this from me, but often what we do is we advertise a live stream about 4 to 5 weeks in advance, and we plan for it, we get ready for it, we advertise it and so on. And then we end up with, thankfully, as we did for today, about 700 people who've registered for the live stream. Interestingly, we only agreed and thought about running our end of year live stream 10 days ago. And we had the same result in terms of people registering for the live stream, which we're really thankful for, as we've had with about 5 weeks of work to prepare for it, which tells me actually there's a much more effective way to do this. We still put out the same information. We still devote enough time and the proper appropriate time to put on some really great insights for people and do our work to make sure that this is valuable for you. But we can probably crunch that in terms of being a 5-week exercise into probably like 10 days. So there are always ways that we can sharpen and speed up ways of doing things, which is to make my point point in point one, if you missed that, which is about how we can experiment and find new ways of doing things as well. And I think reducing cycle time for many of the routine things that you're probably used to doing as a team can be a really effective thing. I've just started to watch a documentary, so please don't spoil it if you've already seen it. It's on a mountain climber called Nims. Can't remember his surname, but he set out to break this record. And I've watched the first sort of half an hour or so of this documentary. And what it is, there was a German guy, who managed to climb all of the 14 peaks in the world that are above 8,000 meters. Somebody came along and said it shouldn't take 14 years, and they did it in 7 years. And then along comes this guy who's like a special Royal Marine, unbelievable soldier, who says he's going to do this now in 7 months. So I don't know if he's managed to achieve it. But again, the whole idea of taking something, crunching it down and saying we can do that, most people around you will say this is ridiculous, but it seems to be like he's on the path to do it and achieve it as well. So how do we reduce the cycle time? And then the final one is what we would call the culture builder. So we know, based on all of the insights from managers, about 41% of managers believe that culture is the most important element that would attract them to an organization. So this is really interesting. So, take everything else into account: development opportunities, pay, location, all of the other variables that might attract you to an organization. It turns out that culture is the strongest, is the most significant pull, interestingly, and culture tends to be the most significant. What's the opposite to pull? Repel, push. Culture attracts people to the organization, and if it's poor, it repels and causes people to say, you know what, I'm out of here, I'm going to leave. So culture, as we all know, we talk about it so much. Culture change is in the lexicon of everyday business language on LinkedIn and every other platform. Culture change is a constant thing we talk about, and we know culture is key. Now, two things here. One is, how do we try and link the explicit or the values of the organization and make those explicit in something practical? And what we mean is, in so many organizations, they talk about things like collaboration as a value, like trust. And you hear these really nice words which talk about the values or the attributes that they want people to exhibit and demonstrate in the organization. Some organizations go even further and have competencies where they describe sort of situations and examples linked to some of these values. And again, if that may be the case, how well understood is that by you and your team? And I think this is quite important. And then the second part to this is, then if that isn't the case, is how do you then make those explicit? And I would even argue, even if they have been made explicit already through a competency framework, challenge it. And when you think about your business, your team, your organization, I'm willing to guarantee that right now, in December 2025 is very different than it will be in December 2026. And it's very different than it probably was in December 2024. Things change all the time. Everything changes. And when we describe what we think are competencies, sometimes they're not valid anymore in the future, but often they don't get relooked at. So I think it's valuable as an exercise to really think about culture and what that means practically for the team. And I think the second thing, which begins to separate and sort of put clear water between average and exceptional managers and leaders in organizations, is to what extent we can link these values and culture to what it actually means in practice for the customer. The ultimate measure, of course, is the people we serve and deliver for, whether that's customer feedback, that's client feedback, that's impact on society feedback. Depends, we all serve and ultimately try to benefit somebody. And if that somebody isn't saying that this is valuable, then of course it's not valuable. So the values in some cases might not be that valuable, but we don't know because we're not really testing this all the way through to understand the link and the impact with the customer as well. So here are 5 things that we think are like super practical, super useful for 2026 when it comes to building what we would call these management superpowers. The first thing we talked about, if you joined a little late on the stream, is about adaptability advantage. So we found that about 59% of managers believe that their teams adapt well to change. We think that there's a lot to do here, and often the pressures that are exhibiting themselves or showing themselves in organizations don't seem to be getting any less. How do we align ourselves with what we're doing every day to what the organization actually needs in terms of its delivery for its strategy and its objectives? We found that about 50% of managers believe that we are aligned. Stakeholders, it turns out that about 55% of managers believe that they are delivering and meeting their stakeholder needs. Capacity, we found out that about 45% of managers feel overloaded and stressed and overworked and everything else. And how can we try and negate some of that? We're not going to solve it all, of course, but we can try to some extent. And then the final one in terms of culture we understand that culture is probably the most important attractor to the organization in terms of bringing in new talent, and of course can be equally powerful in repelling and losing great talent also on the other side as well. So 5 key things. We're going to spend a bit of time now, hopefully that stirred the mind a bit, and we've sort of called you to think of some questions and some things that you might want to share. Now, this could be things that you share that you think are working really, really well in your organization, or it might be that some of this has stirred up some questions that you might want to share as well. For a few of the very, very lucky winners, we're going to share with you a couple of things that we're going to do as some giveaways today. So we've got a couple of copies of the book, which is called How to Become a World-Class Manager. This launched in its original format in 2023, and this year we've been honored that it's launched across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and wider across GCC in Arabic. And also, we've got my colleague here live on the line, also from the UK, who's going to share with you. Ash, I understand that there's a golden mug of truth. The World Class Manager mug is on offer today. Is this true?
Now, this is right, Wayne. Thank you so much for everyone joining today. And we have something that is never gifted, is bestowed on those that we feel is worthy of the World Class Manager golden mug. So for the best question today, please get them in. I'm going that way there so we can see it on a 360. Please get your questions in, and we will be we'll be bestowing the golden mug on today's winner. So good luck.
It's an important point, Ash, because many people work very hard for this and it's bestowed upon them, but one person today gets this mug. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, what a prize. So get your questions in and let us know your thoughts and your ideas.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ash. So that's it. Unbelievable prizes on offer. We got the book, we got the mug, and of course, we've got access to the World Class Manager program. So please do feel free, depending on what platform you're on, if you're on Facebook or on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live or through the direct web address, please do feel free to drop a question in, share a question. We'll hang out for a little while and hopefully answer some of these questions coming through. And as we said, when we look at everything to do with this whole focus on building these superpowers, when it comes to 2026, what do you think? Actually, it'd be interesting to find out your thoughts. What are some of those most important areas that we do need to strengthen? It could be also be in your area, in your team, in your department, or even in your sector, that you're already seeing and feeling the effect of job losses through AI and technology. I know somebody who works for a large organization where they've just let go of thousands of people who they've now said that they will not be replaced, actually, because advanced technology will be taking their roles, which is coded language, of course, for AI. So we know that this is happening, it's coming, and how do we put ourselves in the best possible position? So if you do have any questions, do please feel free to shout out, jump in, and we'll look forward to sharing with you these unbelievable prizes. If you don't want to share a question publicly, please feel free to drop this through to our LinkedIn, and you can drop us a direct message and we can get back to you that way as well. So we've got a question coming in. Wonderful. So a question here from Hanley Mooten. Apologies, I'm reading this at the exact same time that you're reading this as well. Love the idea of a capacity creator. I particularly want to share this with a member of staff, but how can we motivate someone to stick to this time set aside for them to have extra capacity? What a great question, Hanley. Thank you very, very much for that. A couple of things here just off the bat. So one thing is, when it comes to individuals, I get the constant feedback that they feel other things takes more priority. Interesting. Nice twist to this statement here, Hanley. So this is an interesting one when it comes to the individual. And I think one thing is, often we can assume a lot about an individual in terms of what it is that they want, their hopes, dreams, ambitions, their goals. And often then we make a further assumption about how that means that they should or will probably be likely to behave. One of the things we focus on a lot, actually, there are 2 core modules of our program called Great Goal Setting and Inspiring Appraisal Conversations. Those are really important for us for a number of reasons, mainly because it enables the individual as well as the manager to get a much better understanding of what their view of the world is, their personal philosophy, and where they might want to go. And that's informed by a whole bunch of things. That could be about their formative years. In the first 0 to 7 years, most psychologists will tell you that has a huge impact in terms of your view of the world. Then, of course, we've got their formative years that they go through in adolescence and how they've come up with their goals and ideas of where they might want to go in life. So getting a good read of somebody's background and understanding all of them can be a really useful way to start to try and figure out why they might not act in accordance with some of the things that you think are probably good for them. Creating the time and space for someone you think is often quite a benevolent act. of the manager to do, and why wouldn't they utilize that? Well, it might be to do with the way that they operate, the way that they work, the way that they manage their own time, and there can be underlying things, in a sort of beneath all of that. So one of the exercises that I would argue is a really good thing to do, and it may be something you've done already, so apologies if we're teaching you to suck eggs, as we would say, is to try and understand their backstory as much as possible. So one exercise in doing that is asking someone from beginning to where they are now, if they wouldn't mind, explain your life story. It'd be great to learn a bit more about you. And sometimes this can be really revealing in trying to figure out why someone might work, and their work patterns and the way that they operate might work in a certain way. That can be one way of approaching this. But I agree, I'm sure it can be frustrating, but you're doing the absolute right thing of trying to create the space and time for them as well. So great question, Annie. Thank you very much. And let us know which would be for you. Given that you're the first question to come in, I think you should get the mug. I think the golden mug of truth is coming for you. So question here from Andrea. I saw firsthand how your idea of adaptability works, but I think most people struggle on how to actually do it. Managers usually need to help and support their team with the change, like the AI you mentioned. Do you have specific tips on how to do this? Well, yes, one of the specific tips, I think, is in the constant communication and making sure that people are clear about what's going on. One of the things that we've observed, so I'll go way back for a moment in order to answer your question, Andrea, is we looked at communications as a challenge in most organizations. Now, every single organizational survey that I've probably ever seen across the 1,000 or more organizations that we've interacted with will tell us to a large degree that communications, according to the people, needs to be improved. Now, when you ask people specifically what communications do you actually mean, often they mean something which is quite personal to them. And it turns out from our experience and our investigation that, of course, communications is tremendously subjective. So what I feel is improved communications may be different to you, Andrea, and may be different to everybody else. And equally, if my personal conditions for what I would call improved communications have now been met, then I would agree that communications is improving. In actuality, communications for everybody else may have got worse. I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's got better for me. And what it means is that I'm much clearer. So therefore, I feel much more in control and the context is better. We also found a couple of organizations during the last economic downturn which had to make some quite regrettable layoff decisions and redundancies. And in both organizations, and these were two exceptional companies, we found companies who managed to go through that whole redundancy process. And unfortunately, they had to let go of some great talent because they couldn't afford to keep people anymore. But the people that they let go of and the people who stayed had a higher regard in the employee engagement survey than they did before the redundancy program happened. And this is rare for us to find an example where an organization would go through that but have a higher feedback in the staff survey. And when we looked into both of those organizations, interestingly, both companies exhibited the exact same behavior. They had exceptional communication of what was going on. So regular weekly team briefings, good conversations, good discussion, and therefore psychologically, of course, you feel much more in control when you know what's going on. So I think it says to us what the answer is definitely going to be for the rapid pace of change with AI. I think the key thing is people often feel out of control and don't quite understand what's happening here. And one of the interesting things, I also like to run regular polls on LinkedIn. And one of the polls I ran on LinkedIn recently was I asked the question, AI, are you bored of it? Are you excited by it? And the interesting thing was the majority of people came back and actually said they're bored of it. Now, when I looked at the list of people who I know, and some people I know probably haven't spent that much time investigating some of these new AI tools and platforms, because I know who they are, I couldn't say that they were bored of it. What they're bored of is hearing about it all the time. So it's actually that they don't really understand it, but they're just bored of hearing about it all the time. And I think the more that you do understand something, invariably, as I've tried to, as much as possible, get to a better level of understanding about many of these tools and advances and philosophies, the more exciting it actually feels, the more you learn about it. So again, I think there is something ultra basic here. It's great context, regular conversation, regular communication, which can make a huge impact. Long answer to your question, Andrea, but I hope that helps to sort of unpack that a little bit. And a third question coming in. Awesome. Let's go. So question here from Anitha. Thank you very much, Anitha. You mentioned that nobody challenges assumptions. How do you challenge senior leadership assumptions without being labeled as a troublemaker? Oh, what a great question. What a great question. Well, of course, doing that in public, as I described in the example, is probably not the smartest way that you want to do it. I think, though, what we can do is maybe combine here the challenging assumptions around the strategy with the second point I made around how do you build some better stakeholder relationships. So I would advise it would be a great idea to identify 2 or 3 key senior stakeholders and see if it was possible. And many people in organizations would say, oh, there's no way I'm going to do that. There's no way, I'm too junior. I can't ask the CEO for a coffee. Well, that would be unprecedented. No one would do that. Politically, that would be like career suicide, making a move like that. So we do know that there can be that fear, but there might be other senior people in the organization that you could ask to have a conversation with. So that's step 1. Step 2 is trying to figure out and understand the strategy in a better way. So and what that means is once you get into that type of conversation, of course, you're not just going to go and meet somebody senior and say, I disagree with your strategy. I think it sucks. And they might ask you, why do you think it sucks? And you're like, well, I'm not really sure. I just don't like the idea of it. Of course, we're not going to do that. Of course, we need to understand what the strategy is, understand it in and out, understand the numbers and so on, and therefore be able to engage in a really value-adding conversation with somebody senior. That can be a really effective way to do it. So many leaders, CEOs, C-suite members, executives I've come across have said to me, I have a very, the common statement is I have an open door policy here. And my usual response to that statement is, well, how many people come through your door? And then most people say, well, no one. Well, that's useful then, isn't it? An open door policy doesn't mean that much. So again, proactively, not many people go out of their way to go and talk to senior people in the organization. When you talk to many senior people in the organization, they wish that people would come to them and say, you know what, I've understood this strategy or this growth plan or this new project or this partnership or this acquisition. And actually, I think this is a bad idea. Nobody comes to senior people largely with that sort of feedback. And I think, and if you're in a senior position, you want that feedback. You want people to come to you with ideas and thoughts, but not many people actually do. Even if it was totally at odds with your view as a senior leader, just the chance to debate that for many senior people would be a gift, but often that doesn't happen. So I think here represents an opportunity for you to be able to open up, I hope, more senior strategic relationships, and maybe in public forum disagreeing with the CEO and saying that their idea is a bad idea might not be the best career move, but you understand what I mean. There are proactive and practical ways that we can do that as well. So I'm conscious of time, but there's more questions. We're going to get to the questions. Carolyn, so sorry for everyone who's asked the questions so far. We, of course, are going to send you a copy of this book. So thank you so much, Caroline, as well. So Caroline, what cultural shifts are most critical for organizations to thrive in an AI-driven environment? Great question. Also, how do you embed these superpowers into performance reviews or talent development? Wow, what a brilliant question. Let me read that again. What cultural shifts are most critical for organizations to thrive in an AI-driven environment? So my answer to that is based on the fact that most organizations, if you're of any size, even if you employ more than 50 people, have a significant pool of talent and expertise. Most organizations will go out and find somebody who they want to employ, and they're employing them based on the idea that they're employing all of their skills, all of their abilities, which is why they ask you for a resume or a CV in the first place. We're trying to, in a way, acquire all of the skills and experiences that this individual has developed and honed and crafted in their career, and put that to use for the good of the organization and the good of the people that the organization serves, products, services, or whatever else, the clients and customers that the organization ultimately serves. The challenge, though, is often what organizations are guilty of doing, not because there's a particularly bad person involved in all of this, but we take and find great talent, and we often don't leverage that talent and that skill set. I think one of the best things that we can probably do right now, and especially when you've got a younger population, is to leverage the collective skill and intelligence of the people in the organization to do that. I'll give you a quick example. Last week we had, and it's all public, it's on my LinkedIn page, you'll see one of the posts last week actually, we had an opportunity to bring one of the senior leaders from BBC in the UK. Actually, he's the director of BBC Sport, and it was a wonderful interaction. We had the BBC Sport leader together at one of the best business schools in London. We had a presentation from 24, I think, undergraduate groups. And what we did about 3 months ago is the director of BBC Sport briefed this entire group of undergrads about their strategic challenges in organization and what they're focused on. And then we had 24 groups of young people. We did a 4-hour presentation super marathon where they presented back to the director their ideas on what they think the organization could and should do better. Largely, there was a lot there around technology platforms, social media platforms, how they should structure content, technology ideas, and so on. Absolutely wonderful. It was like a 4-hour masterclass of idea generation from young people. Now, these are people who don't even work for the organization. They're not even paid by the organization. They're just volunteering their ingenuity and their innovation and their ideas, and they don't even yet have experience, right? This is an undergrad community. So if that's possible with an undergrad community, imagine what's possible with everybody else in the organization who already understands the culture. So I think the way to leverage the skill set of people and the talents and the expertise is certainly to create a much more effective interaction between the leader and also other people. One way to do that, I would argue, and I think this should cost the organization like nothing to do this, is to try and be as clear as possible on a few really pointy strategic challenges for the organization and get people across the organization to interact with that and give their thoughts on that. It's probably one of the smartest ways that you can leverage the collective intelligence of the organization. And I think leveraging the collective intelligence is probably one of the few ways that we're going to have a chance of keeping our jobs against all of this artificial intelligence. Maybe that's a nice way to end it. So I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who dialed in, who connected. If you're a regular on these live streams for 2025, a huge thank you. We've had thousands and thousands of people over the course of this year, and our commitment to do these just gets bigger for 2026. So we look forward to kicking off in the new year. Actually, on the first week, we'll share the dates, on the first week of February, we're going to be interviewing somebody absolutely brilliant. She's the chief financial officer of one of the largest logistics companies in the UK, amazing lady called Alison Brogan. So we're going to be sharing her story about how she became the CFO of the organization and her journey, her career, her views on strategy and so on. So look out for that. That's going to be our first one of 2026. We're committed to running many more of these as we go through the next year. And again, a huge thank you to everyone who's been involved. Thank you very much. And of course, to our team as well, all around the world, a huge thank you to everything that you do. And we look forward to doing much more in 2026. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon. And if you're celebrating Christmas, have a wonderful, wonderful and happy Christmas. See you.